Welcome to the Salem Chamber Podcast. I'm Tom Hoffert, CEO of the Salem Chamber, and we're pleased to have you listening. Let's jump right in. Today we're joined by Tammy Dennee, Executive Director of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association. Tammy, welcome to the Salem Chamber Podcast.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here.
Well, it's great to have you in. You are somebody who brings incomparable energy, and you light up a room. You've served as MC for chamber functions. You are very well known in the space of ag, and I know you went through a career transition from the dairy end into the Cattlemen's Association. We want to talk about it all, but okay. Tammy, to start out, let's have our listeners learn a little bit about you. Where did you grow up, and what was adolescence like for one Tammy Dennee?
Okay, I grew up in the small town of the Dalles and am born and raised Oregonian. My husband and I have known each other since 7th grade, and life's twists and turns. We did not marry until just 25 years ago, and a month ago we celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. So adolescence included my current husband. We have a lot of great memories hanging out with the same crowd, going to high school together, and graduating the same high school class at the Dalles High School. So we are classmates, but have been wonderfully in love and married for the last 25 years.
Oh, that's a great segue. Tell me, when you went into high school, Tammy, what were you thinking you may want to do in life professionally?
Well, when I went into high school and then became a member of the Honor Society and then was elected president of that club, there were a number of ambitions, but I'm from a child of poverty. So I was from a broken home. I was the oldest of 3 children. I then took over head of household at 7 years old. So my childhood was very different than some of my peers. And it was interesting as I began to think beyond high school. What would that look like? What would I want to do as an adult? I actually did come to the community college here in Salem under scholarship and intended to move on after community college, Schmeketa, to Oregon State University, where several of my peers were going to school, but that was beyond my reach financially. So that college career was cut short. Unfortunately, I had a boyfriend at the time who said, let's get married. And I said, sure. And then as soon as I left college and went back to the Dalles, he said, I don't think that this is the right move after all. Well, my life had been forever changed. I went into the workforce and have worked ever since. I finished college as a young mother with 2 young children. I don't recommend that path. I recommend that students who are of the college age finish when that is the chapter in your life to finish, but everything happens for a reason. Back to your original question, I really thought that I would be an attorney. I thought that I would eventually go on to serve as a judge. That was always my passion. Life took a very different turn, and I ended up serving in agriculture, and I've been serving in the natural resource community for all of my profession as an adult. I started in the wheat industry and served in the wheat industry as their executive director, but a total number of service years was 17 in wheat, and so I raised my family and my young children in Pendleton. My husband and I married, and we lived and raised our children there in Pendleton, and we're in that community for 20 years. His job brought us over here to Salem almost 10 years ago now. He works for Department of Transportation, and I wasn't sure what I would do once we made that transition. My work with natural resources has always included Salem. I've always spent a good deal of time in the Capitol building, engaging legislators on both sides of the aisle. And so it's been my passion to serve agricultural producers. The dairy sector asked me if I would come and serve, and I said yes, and was happy to serve there for 6 years. And then the cattle industry came and said, we have an opening. We'd like you to consider being our executive director. So I went from wheat to dairy, now to cattle.
That's quite a transition. And one of the real fun memories I have of you is at the state fair. You were creating swirled ice cream cones.
Yes, in the Red Barn for the dairy women, and I still do that.
Oh, that's great. Talk to me about representing commodities, recommending advocating for strong industries in our ag sector in Oregon. Starting with the wheat industry, what pulled you in? Was it a career of, hey, I don't really know what I'm going to do, so I'll try this out, or did you? What compelled you to first get into representing the wheat industry?
It was just one of those opportunities of timing where I had an individual who was our county judge in Wasco County, Judge Bill Holtz. He knew who I was. He knew my work ethic. I had been working in the district attorney's office and was transitioning out of the Dalles for a change and moving to the city. And he contacted my boss to be Tom Wynn, who was the administrator of the Oregon Wheat Commission. Most people don't even know there is a commission or such thing as a checkoff, but that was my first experience. Judge Holtz contacted Tom and said, I am sending this woman your way. I know you have an opening and you will hire her. And Tom Wynn said, yes, sir. And I went in for an interview and was shaking in my boots, much like I am right now. And Tom asked me questions about my knowledge of the wheat industry, which at that moment was absolutely zero. I had no idea about the trade and how important the trade industry is to that sector of agriculture. I had no idea at all about the port system. A bushel of wheat was just a statement. It had no relevance in my day-to-day language. So much like every other consumer where we just take our food source so for granted, and it just caught hold. And I've never regretted serving agricultural producers in the three sectors that I have had and continue to have the opportunity to represent and advocate for.
I remember at my time at Don Poncho, we obviously are a big user of wheat and corn, and the discovery of the Kansas City Board of Trade and the Chicago
Yes.
Board of Trade, and watching the dailies and the futures. Wheat has had its ups and downs.
Yes.
We say in the industry, corn is king, everybody
Yes.
else follows. Talk to me about the complexities of transitioning from the wheat industry over into the
Livestock.
dairy sector. Yes.
It's a very different world when you're talking about a crop that is in the field where there are periods of rest. You plant a crop, you monitor it, manage it as it's growing, you harvest it when it's mature, and then you can sell into the market when you're ready. Livestock, especially dairy, is 365, 24/7. And for working functional dairies, some of these farm families, dairy families, their day consists of a 3 o'clock alarm into the milking parlor, chores in between. If they milk 3 times a day, then they go back to the milking barn and then milk again. Chores between the next shift and then the final shift. A light dinner, 7:30, 8 o'clock bedtime, and the day starts again at 3 a.m. And they are absolutely salt of the earth, dedicated, hardworking men and women and children, and they're just fabulous individuals. Unfortunately, that number of dairy farms in the state of Oregon continues to shrink right now. There are so many pressures and so many misconceptions around that sector of agriculture, but it was very different coming from a crop to livestock and learning about the pressures and the industry challenges, and many of those are around public perception and the burden of regulations that are placed on those farm families.
We are, as a state, unfortunately not super well known for taking care of the business community. We are not super well known for being very supportive of our ag industry, although there are very strong advocates. Certainly, some of our public policy is not reflective of the value systems of most Oregonians who look at family farms and the industry of farming and ag as sacred and really the foundation. We sit today here in Salem, Oregon, in the heart of Oregon's agricultural community. We have an incredible diversity of crops. We have livestock. We have basically anything that is produced in Oregon has probably got a branch of it within maybe 30 to 40 miles of Salem. As you see things in the industry in Oregon, are there some things that you're encouraged by, or is this a time of great consternation?
I think it depends on how we divide that question.
Okay.
If we are looking at it through the lens of the producer, and it depends on which sector of ag we're speaking to, but these are commodities. And what we do notice and what we do say frequently is agricultural producers really are business owners, and they manage businesses. They are an industry, they are corporations, and they are businesses without walls. The public fails to see them as businesses that just exist without a structure per se, but they are absolutely economic. Their vitality, and they're the economic engine of Oregon. We would not exist as a state or as a community, and certainly not as a county, without that pillar in our economy. And we just fail to acknowledge it because it goes on, and we drive past these beautiful vistas, and many of those are maintained as part of these private property owners and their businesses that they're managing every day. So some sectors of agriculture are seeing some increases in their return on their investment, while others, because they are operating in a commodity, they're seeing some downturn. That is the nature of commodities. This last legislative session, to get to your question, we had an opportunity to have some very bold dialogue with some of our elected officials from both sides of the aisle. It's easy for elected officials at times to go after something that they don't understand. And what's easier than going after production agriculture? There really isn't anything. So we keep putting more on the backs of our agricultural producers without recognizing what's already there and what they're already managing. And many of these operations are husband, wife, maybe the next generation coming in, or maybe the next generation saying, no, thank you. I see how hard you're working, and I hear the conversation around the dinner table, and there's not much return on this investment where you're working so hard for such a little return. I think I'll go out into the workforce and earn a paycheck, so at least I can take something to the bank that I can count on. That's a huge conversation. But in the Capitol building, when we were able to talk about, as you consider new policies, let's talk about what's already on the shoulders of our agricultural producers. And let's have a conversation about what is the impact going forward. And are we willing to have that discussion? And we got towards the end of the legislative session and actually had some of our friends that are in the moderate Democrat Party who said, on the record, we've done enough. We've done enough to production agriculture. We need to give them a rest. And we applauded. We were so thrilled to have had our messages resonate with these individuals who we knew were going into their meetings with their respective caucus and having to stand to defend that conversation and defend that statement that they'd made on the record. It's not a popular statement because until that point, it felt like it was fair game on agriculture. And I think we just need to be careful as a society, as a county, within all of our layers of government. We need to be mindful of where our food comes from. It's pretty simple. And if we just boil it down to that simplistic value that we as individuals, as consumers, we value our food source and we value these producers. We want them to be solvent. We want them not to be overburdened. We benefit. And we benefit in the grocery store by the variety that we have available to us. We just don't give it any thought. But we as individuals should be protecting, promoting, preserving our food source and these producers every single day. And when we run across an agricultural producer, just say thank you with sincerity, because their job means we eat.
I look at our local retailers, Ross Fresh Markets, Easy Orchards. Those are two companies who have made a significant commitment to purchasing their ag products, their meat, their poultry locally, and I think we recognize companies like that. But we do have a convenient truth as consumers, don't we? We go in, and every time we're at Ross, there's raspberries there, and every time there's fresh apples. And what is occurring is that sourcing is occurring across the globe.
Yes.
And it has an impact. And when we can choose to purchase locally, it needs to be not just highly suggested, it needs to be the norm. And so I am hopeful for the local products and the expansion and the understanding that consumers are starting to have about purchasing local. Tammy, when you see, I think another portion of this dynamic that often is not spoken about because maybe contextually some of the challenges around its past, but ag is a huge user of labor as well.
Yes.
And so I think when we talk contextually, we have to also understand the amount of paychecks
Yes.
that are being rendered from our ag community. Do you have a sense of ag employment? And I know we hear a lot about efficiencies, and they're rightfully so. Companies are always looking for ways to be more. Profit is not a bad word, number one, but to be more profitable, to be more efficient. Ag is still an industry with a huge labor component.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you see in Oregon? Are there trends in the labor that you're seeing in the ag communities, or is labor declining? What's your sense in that space?
I wouldn't be so bold to say labor is declining, but I can tell you with absolute certainty that there are a number of ongoing conversations and concerns that continue to be raised around minimum wage for our ag workforce, our farm workforce. Everyone agrees that every individual who puts their shoulder to the wheel of any job deserves to be paid fairly and equitably. The workforce that comes through seasonally to harvest seasonal crops, we look at slightly differently because they've been doing this for generations and they are paid fairly within this time frame. But now we're going to be forced to keep them on a 40-hour work week in order to limit or manage that additional expense, where previous to the passage of minimum wage that went all the way across into agriculture, where we'd previously been allowed to be seen differently for our seasonal workforce. Those changes now are affecting these seasonal workers who came through and intended and want to work 60-hour weeks because they know it's for a season. It's for a period, and they will work those hours and they continue on to follow the crops to another state. And now we've shifted the paradigm without realizing the impact of that policy decision. But while we had attempted to have that conversation in the Capitol building, it fell on deaf ears, unfortunately. Now we'll have to await the outcomes.
Yeah, you've essentially capped the work week for individuals, and many of whom depend on overtime to generate income for their families.
Yes.
And it's a peculiar, situation in that you have a workforce that is indicating we would like the hours,
yes,
and we'd like to work those extra hours and receive that extra pay. And essentially the state now coming in and say, nope, as employers, you're going to halt that at 40 hours. And it almost as if you need to garner a second workforce.
Yes.
In many of these things. So, okay, complex topic. I appreciate your
Yes.
perspective on that.
Very complex.
Let's talk about your duties today. So
Okay.
you made the transition from the dairy industry to the cattle.
To the whole cow.
The whole cow.
From the udder to the whole cow. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Talk to our listeners. What's a day in the life of an executive director of the Cattlemen's Association?
We are the largest for human consumption commodity in the state of Oregon, and that it comes with a tremendous responsibility. There are 18,000 ranchers in the state of Oregon, 1.1 or 1.2 million head of cattle, and what makes this industry, this sector of ag, so relevant is that there are cattle in every single county in the state of Oregon. All 36 counties are home to cattle. Even Hood River, even Multnomah, every county has cows in their county. They might be very small herd sizes, but they are there. That makes our conversation that we have the opportunity to have with elected officials relevant. Doesn't matter who the elected official is, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle from which they serve. It makes the conversations relevant. And I love that about this sector of agriculture in a way that is so different and so unique from many of the other sectors that are regional based. So my day to day is whatever is necessary. We are small staffed. We say regularly we are a staff of 2 doing the work of 10. And my day includes anything that's necessary. And that includes everything and anything from interpreting policy and speaking to elected officials, speaking to agency directors, talking about our perspective about administrative rules that are being drafted after the close of a legislative session, policy makers that are running for election, just getting a sense of who they are and their perspectives. Helping them maybe understand a little bit more about the livestock industry, introducing them to my leadership. That's always one of my favorite opportunities, is taking my ranchers, men and women, into the Capitol building, introducing them and opening the door for those conversations to take place. So much of what I do on the day-to-day basis is similar to what you do, Tom, is we manage associations, and associations are complex. We manage our memberships, we manage our policies, we manage all of our governance documents. We plan special events and ongoing, reoccurring events. All of that takes time and expertise and long days, seasonally. So everything in an association world, not unlike every other association, it tends to be cyclical. So there are times when it's very, there's a heavy burden to carry. There are other times when we get to take a deep breath, have a minute, and remember to look back at the recent successes and celebrate for about 30 seconds, and then looking forward as to, okay, now what's in front of us. So my days are complex and full. There's never a dull moment. I say that frequently. There's just never a dull moment. And most of the time I just have to say, it's fine, it's fine, it's all fine, it's going to be fine, let's figure it out.
Well, you're an optimistic person, and you bring a positive energy to that. I remember George Puentes would always say, a pat on the back is 2 feet from a kick in the rear. As we serve our membership, Tammy, tell our listeners a little bit about your membership. And you had mentioned the number of different cattlemen and ranches across Oregon. Tell me a little bit about how the association has matured over the years and what you're seeing with your membership now.
The association is now 110 years old. 2023 marks 110 years of existence for this association when it was established. And it continues to mature. For the ranching community, it is a little bit difficult for our ranchers to want to come to Salem and to want to trust me to come into the Capitol building. They hesitate a bit, but we have conversations and I prepare their script. And we talk about the importance that if they don't show up, if they don't carry their conversation, if they don't speak to these elected officials and help them understand the outcomes and the results of decisions that are being made and current policies that are being debated and discussed, if they don't show up, then someone will fill that void. Someone will speak on their behalf. Someone will postulate some truth that they hold as their own that may represent a very different mindset than the rancher who is in the field, managing their livestock, managing that cow-calf herd, and taking care of it in spite of predators, in spite of the weather, in spite of market burdens and prices, and whether or not the next generation is wanting to come back. Managing in light of succession and what does it mean now that I am a certain age, and where do I go with my private land, and what happens when I need a grazing permit and I don't have agencies who are willing to be accessible. What happened during the pandemic when everyone had difficulty communicating? So my job every day is to champion their issues, but also encourage the engagement of my ranchers. And it is difficult for them to want to engage because it's easier to stay back. It's easier to bunker in. It's easier to adopt the attitude of, I'll just keep doing my thing out here in Baker County, and I'll just, if I don't acknowledge you, then you won't acknowledge me, and I can keep doing what my family's been doing for generations. It's not that way anymore. I think that social media, I think that our connectivity in technology causes us to need to be engaged. And that's the transition point we're at, is that engagement and the need for engagement, the need for them to tell their story, the need for them to help the legislative body who aren't from agriculture understand the complexity of what it means to be engaged in that business sector.
As advocates, you and I could sing all day about, I can sing all day about the value of small business, and I know you certainly can for your ranching members and the community that supports the food markets and the like. But there is nothing that replaces having someone from the industry come and share a firsthand perspective.
Yes.
And I think we're both very blessed to be asked to serve in the roles that we do. And we do it well, but nobody can tell the story like the people living it every single day. And it seems to be resonating with elected officials. I like the approach of the Cattlemen's Association, just like the Salem Chamber. We are not a partisan organization.
No,
we are a thought center for common sense, if anything. I would hope, and bringing solutions to challenging questions. It's a comfortable chair for me sometimes because I get to talk about how great the small business community is. You get to talk about your family farms. But we do have critics who say, oh, look, everything's big business and all these profits are heading out of town. Well, 80% of our membership employs 20 or less people. So it couldn't be further from the truth. But we have to break through that with certain people who want to have a certain mindset. And maybe it's a mindset of convenience. Tell me about how you tackle the environmental challenges of where you're starting to see more and more that, cattle are a huge component to our environmental methane releases and the like. How are you tackling that tough topic?
Engaging our research community is how we're tackling that. We need research to help us understand how we can be more effective, how we can be more engaged, and we being our active producer group on the ground, putting more than rhetoric to the facts of the conversation so that we can have something that helps beat back some false truth that continues to be repeated time and again. It's repeated in social media. It's repeated in the halls of the Capitol. It becomes that convenient truth of and mostly it's really more of a diet preference. Because of a diet preference, we want to now choose for every individual their diet preference by wanting to eliminate or limit a sector of agriculture. I don't know that any of us really support that and defend it on the widespread, but it's the loud, noisy voices that might be the minority that penetrate the conversation because they have nothing else to do but to continue to be the noise in the conversation. So it is absolutely imperative that there's never been a more important time for my ranchers to show up and have conversations to help a legislator understand the day-to-day reality of what it means to have cattle out in open space, in public land, grazing, eating the fuel off the forest floor so that we are helping to manage forest fire. That's a truth. And we need to talk about it more. We need to put data to that, and we need to measure it, and we can manage it and measure it and monitor it, and then we can talk about the outcomes. And that's what we're doing. So we have a very close working relationship with Oregon State University. We appreciate those researchers. We appreciate the dean of the College of Ag and their willingness to hear us, to lean into this sector, to help us put that data set together so we can have conversations here in Salem and in Washington, D.C.
That's what, and you led right into my next question. Obviously do a very good job connecting Oregon and talking about those issues. How do you play into the national conversation, Tammy?
We have the opportunity to partner with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association as one of their members, and they have a very professional lobby group in Washington, D.C., and then they have a presence in Denver. So they have 2 offices, very large staff, more than 100 individuals on staff, doing a variety of tasks. They're absolutely amazing professional individuals who represent the nation's cattle industry and do that really well. I have the opportunity of reaching out with regularity to that lobby staff and asking them questions about pieces of legislation that we know are now being introduced. What are the chances of that piece of legislation getting legs, is what we call it? Is it going to move? Is it going to be assigned to a committee? Do we hear anything from leadership about the status? And what can we do as a state to lean in to help our members of Congress and our congressional offices know that Oregon is a player, and Oregon does have a preference as to whether or not a piece of policy goes forward, or whether or not we're asking our members of Congress to please take a no vote if this bill were to come to the House or Senate floor.
You're listening to Tammy Dennee, Executive Director of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association, and hearing clearly that the breadth of that group is going far beyond the boundaries of our state, and that's wonderful to hear, Tammy. We can find our heart where we find our time, and the places where we give our time is often where our passions are. You are extremely involved in this community, and much bigger than Salem, but a couple areas that I thought I'd see if you could share some of your, maybe a little bit of the why behind your involvement and a little bit of your passion. I'm going to start with one that's close to you and your industry, and it would be natural that you're involved, is you play a leadership role within the Salem Chamber of our annual Safe Agri-Business Banquet, which will be happening in January of 2024. Every January, we look forward to that. Tammy, why are you involved in an effort like that?
Well, Marion County is the #1 ag producing county in the state. And when my husband's job moved us to this side of the mountains, this was the place I wanted to plug in. And I put my hand in the air and said, is there a place on the planning committee for this banquet? And can we have conversations about making it ag centric? The audience, don't we want the audience to be our agricultural producers? The answer to that question is yes.
Definitively yes.
Definitively yes. And don't we want the sponsors, and don't we want all of the people who populate these tables that support ag, that are the allied industry around agriculture? We want them in the room, and we want the agricultural producers in the room. And the answer is absolutely yes. That meant we had to build a program that was going to be attractive to that audience. So that's been our challenge, but also been a pleasure to be part of and to have conversations. And Lynn Zielinski-Mills has been our chair, and I've been honored to serve on her committee. She is a staff member from SAFE. Lynn is a champion and has been wonderful to work with, and I've been thrilled and honored to be allowed to be part of that conversation.
Well, you're more than a part of it, and you're very humble. We have incredible leadership on that committee who come together for a really important banquet. But it is a bigger thing that we take on, and that's bringing the ag community to Salem for a night of celebration. Another area that you are extremely involved with, and I'd like to hear about the why behind Rotary.
I am a Rotarian. I've been a Rotarian for now going on 26 or 27 years.
So well before you were in Salem.
Yes. So in Pendleton, I was invited to join Rotary and served on a number of the committees there in Pendleton. What's interesting about Rotary is that when you've seen one Rotary Club, you've seen one Rotary Club. And then when we moved to this side of the mountains, John McCauley, who many of the listeners will very likely know because John is very well known in this community, came to me at a meeting we were at jointly, and he said, I don't suppose you'd like to look at a Rotary Club now that you've relocated. And I said, yes. So he invited me to the Salem Rotary Club, and I was inducted to membership shortly after my first visit. And I am thrilled. That club, that Rotary Club, and the Rotary experience, the entire Rotary experience, has been a wonderful opportunity because we are not political. On Wednesdays at lunch, I can shed that political piece of who I am and walk into a room knowing that I just get to be Tammy Dennee, and I am a fellow Rotarian, and I'm here to serve. And service above self is what we do and what we're about.
Well, it shows, and you carry that proudly. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you have an air to yourself when you walk in, and it's hard to know this when somebody's talking about you, but Tammy, people gravitate to you, and you have just an incredible way of making people feel heard and seen. What if you were to say, hey, Tom, in 2024, here's what I'm really excited about? What would that answer be?
I'm really excited about, and I'm not saying this just because you're seated across the table from me, but I am truly excited to lean in more to this Salem leadership cohort that you've allowed me to be part of, which is quite an honor. So I would not get to meet or know 49 other industry representatives from myriad industries across our community without having been invited to participate in this cohort. And every month it is a priority on my calendar. And the only time I have to say no to the cohort is if my industry that pays my paycheck says we're going to Washington, D.C., or we have another priority.
Don't let them do that. We need you at Leadership Salem each and every month.
But I have really enjoyed it thus far. And I'm looking forward to this month's program because it's Natural Resource Day. So of course I put my hand in the air and said, oh, could I please help with this one? I know I'm still just a cohort member, but I'm really excited to share what does natural resources mean. If you ask people, it has different meaning. And if you're in the industry, if you're serving agricultural producers, I see it differently. And so I'm excited to share that with my cohort members, depending upon, how that works into the day. But I'm excited to see what next Thursday brings.
Tammy is referencing our Leadership Salem cohort, which is a yearly program. It kicks off each year in September. There's an application process to apply. We do accept 45 to 46 individuals each year. We have a bumper class this year, of which Tammy's a key part of. And one thing that I find so special about Leadership Salem is not only is it a cross-section of our community, so you have every culture, every age, every industry, but it's a thought center, and it's intended to not take you to a conclusion, but rather show you something that exists in the greater Salem area, be it a wastewater, Covanta, your, court for children, CASA, you name it. We give the cross section, and rather than tell you what you should feel about it, instead give you the experience and then see how the class talks about these issues. Safe to say the class has not always agreed on all things that they've seen.
Yes, well, that's absolutely evident. Everyone in this cohort has reacted slightly differently to the same experience, which is also an experiment in and of itself. And I've been a little amazed by my reaction to some of the elements has been, oh, okay, that was interesting, and didn't give it much more thought. And other cohort members really had a reaction, had a strong opinion. It's just very interesting. It's a study in humanity, really.
Experiential learning is a really powerful part of that.
Yes.
And getting the diversity of opinion. I mean, we have, as an organization, we have from your farthest right to your farthest left and everywhere in between. And
Yes.
what comes with that is going to be diversity of thought.
Yes.
And I am very impressed with how professional and thoughtful the thought is, because the closer that group gets, the more protective you become of each other, and you're starting to see, wow, different perspectives. So I'm glad you're having a great time in that, and you are a super member in that. As we close up, Tammy, could you share a little bit of tactical information? I'll give you a couple, I'm going to give you a couple one words, and
Okay.
if you will tell me your thoughts on it. So I'm going to give you a topic, and you tell me your thoughts. I'm going to start with the word mentorship.
When given an opportunity to mentor, we are leaning in to a generation that is coming up behind us and helping them benefit from our experiences as they're willing to absorb our experiences. But mentorship is a fabulous way for us to welcome and include that a younger generation of professionals or just community members in any realm, be that in our place of faith or be that in our place of business or even in a cohort. But mentoring means we're sharing and we care enough to show up and to participate.
Collaboration.
Collaboration means you're going to, in my opinion, you're willing to hear different views. And at times that is challenging depending upon where those views are, who the messenger is delivering the message makes it sometimes difficult to hear what they have to say and be willing to collaborate. But we all benefit if we will stay in the conversation and bring our best self to that collaboration effort.
A word that you're very familiar with, and maybe share with our listeners some of your thoughts on it. Volunteerism.
Our community and our world is better for us, for all of us, if we're willing to give of ourselves, if we're willing to show up and we're willing to give some time and make the world a better place around us. And when we pass away, whenever that is, people could say about us that we showed up and we gave of ourselves. And that's how I want to be remembered, as a volunteer who showed up with heart and selflessness and left it all out there and used myself up at times when I drive into the driveway. I'm like, whew, okay, my gas tank is on empty. It's time to refuel. But boy, that felt good. And I'm really happy that I showed up.
Well, you gave me my entree into kind of the last question I usually close with. How, as leaders, we have time depravity. We are always being asked to do something more. We blend our personal lives into our professional lives, sometimes seamlessly, sometimes with a few rough edges. How does Tammy Dennee refill the tank?
I'm blessed with an amazing husband who always comes alongside, and no matter what, he shows up and says, let me help. And so he helps when I am at the end of a time clock or I've overextended myself. For instance, my convention, my Cattlemen's convention was a couple of weeks ago. And at 9:30 at night, he was helping me stuff ballots, build name tags, bake some cookies for one of my exhibitors who I promised cookies for. Why did I do that? Because he asked for them. So my husband, Michael Dennee, is a saint, and sometimes just going home and pulling into the driveway and just going into my house and having a minute to just sit down and enjoy a really nice glass of red wine and just say thank you to my Heavenly Father for what a great life I have and how blessed we are and what a great experience. So just fills me up to just be able to have a minute. I usually don't need very long. Sometimes just a Saturday of nonsense where Michael will drive a group of friends from Rotary, we call ourselves the Winers, to a couple of different vineyards and having some nice wine and just laughing out loud, and it fills my gas tank, and it's so fabulous and so blessed.
Well, we're in the heart of it here. We
Yes,
are
we
in
are.
wine country,
Yes,
and
we are.
you and I both love that, and we're so fortunate. Tammy, if somebody wants to get more information about the Oregon Cattlemen Association, tell us your selfless plug. What's your website, and how would
Okay.
you like us to connect with you on social media?
Well, we do have a Facebook page. So the Oregon Cattlemen's Association also has a website, and I know some individuals consider websites to be passé, but we use ours interactively, orcattle.com. Our statistics are posted there. Any of our events, we have online registration. And this is the shameless plug of all. Every single listener can be a member of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association and support the work that's being done there with a $75 annual donation. And for that, you'll receive our weekly electronic newsletter and 10 issues of our magazine. And we would love to have you in our membership. Those applications are online and anyone can join. We'd love to have you, and your $75 helps support the work of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association. So you don't have to own your own cow-calf pair in order to be a member. You can join because you want to support the work of this association.
orcattle.com. This has been a conversation with Tammy Dennee, Executive Director of the Oregon Cattlemen's Association. And we cannot wait for you to meet her in person. You will know her immediately. She comes and walks with the bright shining light behind her. Make sure to take a moment to introduce yourself to Tammy next time you're there. Tammy, thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing a little bit about your life and the work that you do on behalf of your clients.
Thank you, Tom. What a blessing. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Salem Chamber podcast. The Salem Chamber is a 501c6, not-for-profit organization representing nearly 1,100 businesses in the greater Salem area. For additional information, please visit salemchamber.org. This has been a production of Dan Johnson and Lena Prine on the Salem Chamber's professional staff team.